was quite surprised at how kind, even just small acts of, I ran out of water, a random stranger that didn't have a lot would give me a bottle of water, or whether they'd give me a lift to the airport, or whether they'd point me in the right direction, or whether they would remind me that, oh, by the way, around the corner there's a couple of dogs, you might want to avoid that street, they're stray dogs, and little things and then they add up to, I stayed with something like 80 plus families around the world that just said, don't know you, but you're doing this thing, come and stay with us, and couldn't necessarily speak their language. They may never see them again. And it was brilliant. I have this wonderful perspective now of the planet, and it's almost a paradoxically tiny and huge at the same time.
This episode of Outliers, I'm speaking with someone who's giving Pitbull a run for his money at the title of Mr. Worldwide. I'm talking to Nick Butter, who has run a marathon in every country in the world. That's 196 marathons, or 196 marathons more than most people run. What Nick was able to accomplish in around 2 years is so incredible, and I was so fortunate to be able to pick his brain on how he first comes up with such an ambitious idea, how he goes about planning it, and what were some of the high and lowlights of such an intense journey. If you're interested in running, adventure, or travel, this is a great podcast for you to check out. I've linked all of Nick's socials and charity in the description below. Be sure to check it out. So, let's get into it. You've ran a marathon in 196 countries, every country in the world. And I'm curious, does it seems too ambitious to think of or even imagine at the beginning. Do you piecemeal that? Like, I want to run a marathon in every country in North America or South America, and then all of a sudden the world seems possible? How does that ambition even begin?
That's a good point, and I think that's very true. It was very over-ambitious. It was probably quite naive to think of. It was born from wanting to do something to raise some money for Prostate Cancer UK, a charity that was closely linked with a friend of mine who was dying of cancer, and I wanted to do something big enough to get some attention. I also wanted to do something that aligned with what I love. I was already a runner. I already loved to travel, meeting people, taking photos, writing stories. So I thought, well, let's think big. What would capture the imaginations of people, and also what would I be proud to do if this journey was so difficult that it wasn't possible to complete? What would I still be proud to have tried? So I kind of went with the approach of go big, and if something in the middle is the end, then that's still a good achievement. But as it happened, I didn't really have any appetite for not finishing it, not completing it, and so there was a lot of planning though. It was a 674-day trip, but 2 years worth of planning prior to the start line. So and that was pretty intense planning, not just preparations, logistics, team, safety, visas, flights, route, Guinness World Records, all sorts of stuff that needed to happen.
Yeah, the logistics alone, I'm sure, I can't even imagine, 2 years is it seems a short amount of time to accomplish all of that even.
Yeah, the 2 year timeline, I originally set a target of 550 days, and it took 674. And I thought, I've traveled a lot beforehand, done a lot of races, a lot of running. And I thought, on paper, you can hop from one to the other, and you can do that relatively quickly, providing that you have the funds to do so. Now, the funds was a challenge, big challenge, finding the right amount of money that we needed to put this together. But then there was a lot of other barriers that we hadn't properly thought through. For example, visas, and having validation dates that would expire before I got to the right place, because we would get a visa in the planning process, but then the visa would only be valid for 3 months. So then we'd have to put a date in the diary to say, right, we need to get the Senegal visa on this date, and then that will be valid for 90 days. But if for whatever reason it gets delayed, which it did, then we need to get a new visa. And by that point, that passport might be full because it have too many stamps. So we need to make sure we get that visa on the next passport. And then that passport needs to be with me at the right time, but you can only travel with one passport. So it was a challenge, to say the least, just the logistics of the visas.
Have you heard that quadrant of knowns and unknowns? So you have like your known knowns, unknown
Yeah.
knowns. I'm curious what were the like unknowns that you ran into
Yep.
over your trip of just,
Um,
I didn't even think
yeah,
about
and
preparing for this.
I would say all of it because it was even just sitting my folks and family down at the origin of this whole story to say I'm going to try and be the first person to run a marathon in every country in the world. Their first question to me was, "Well, how many are there?" And I said, "I don't know." That sums up the level of let's just do this. And I think more than anything, you have to have the attitude to think big and then follow through with it and kind of grin and bear it and grit your teeth and go through the struggles and have the right people around you in order to do that. So yeah, the unknown unknowns, safety was a big one because however much the unknowns in safety, there are
Yeah,
still
right.
still a lot of unknowns in there. There's also, I think, one of the biggest was the preconceptions of each country. If I say to you Bahamas, if I say to you Syria, if I say North Korea, it will
Hmm.
conjure an image, it will conjure an attitude, a general energy within the country. You'll think of news articles, you'll think of photos, you'll think of images, but they are all experiences that you haven't lived, that you have learned through kind of the lens of another person's camera or an article or somebody speaking at you through a phone or a screen of some kind in the news. And then when you get there and experience it yourself, then it's different. It can be different in a small way. For example, the Bahamas, you don't think of horrendous any kind of wind and storms. I mean, sometimes you do, but most of the time you go into the Bahamas to have a good
Yeah,
sunny
you
holiday.
think of vacation, right?
Exactly. And I was there, and it was horrendous weather and wet and windy, and ankle deep water. Not my preconception of the Bahamas. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you think of war zones, you think of volatile countries, lots of political volatility, and you think unsafe, you think danger, you think forward planning, and in that regard. And then the experiences were mostly the opposite. Um,
Hmm.
you didn't feel unsafe, you didn't feel in danger. Of course, there were plenty of occasions where it didn't quite go right, but generally speaking, the biggest unknown was what is the country like.
Right.
And I thought I knew roughly, and I was wrong most of the time.
Let's just focus in on one country. So like you mentioned Syria,
Mm,
I'd love to know when you think of in my impression would be like, okay, this is a country that has a higher level of risk than other countries I'm about to visit. How do I think
mm.
about keeping myself safe? Like, was there ever a point where you just said, I think I'm just going to do laps in the airport? Like, I'm not even
Well,
going to venture
I
out.
think, well, that's a good example. The flying into Syria, not possible when I ran. Um, so even the airport scenario was completely out of bounds. That just
Wow.
wasn't happening. You have to go overland. You have to go through the border, and that's a challenge. For every country in the planning phase, we ragged every country. So red, amber, green next to each country in terms of safety. Green was you don't have to worry about much. Amber was I need to check in with the team every day, and I'd have to have certain sat phone kind of comms. And then red was very much having a particular point person on the ground or understanding check-in points every couple of hours. Lots of little things like that we would know whether a country was red, amber, or green. And I would have in my diary, I'd have a PDF of just on my phone, a PDF more or less every day in my diary, which said, this is who you're meeting, this is the car, this is the person looks like, this is
Hmm.
where you'll be running, these are the emergency numbers, this is the embassy staff, whatever it might be. So we had
Right.
it. Planning was very important because safety. There's no point doing it if you're going to put yourself in danger, because then you don't achieve your objective, and you don't get what you need to out of the whole trip personally and for the charity. So yeah, that was quite something going through that, and we had all sorts of talk about unknown unknowns. The driver that I was due to be picking me up in order to go into Syria, he was actually taking another client, another tourist, if you like, through from where I was being picked up in Lebanon into Syria, and the driver was shot and killed a couple of days before I arrived. And so at the very last minute, we had to find another driver, and none of that was organized. We didn't know if it was safe. We didn't know if I would be put in more danger or if the same thing would happen. And we had to have those very real conversations with family, team members, and friends that said, well, do I want to do that? And that's just one country. Yes, it's Syria, but there's an awful lot of other things that go wrong in places which aren't dangerous. So the logistics, as you rightly say, was very difficult. But that also made for great stories and for a great experience, because if it was just plain sailing, then it wouldn't have been as fun.
Is there I almost relate your experience to an astronaut. They talk about this like big blue ball moment where they look at the Earth and see it as an entity without borders. And I wonder, even with kind of seeing political unrest or dangerous moments, is there a moment where you think, okay, the people in Syria aren't actually that different than the people in the Bahamas, and I'm seeing like shared hospitality across every country I'm in? Is there a moment like that?
That's very astute, Kip. I completely agree with you. I think I have a very unique specifically first-hand perspective of humanity and mankind. We are innately kind. We are innately helpful. We are innately selfless. The experiences I've had all over the world, even though we're living on this planet where there is war, where there is 2 million children under the age of 5 every year die of starvation. Even though that's happening, most people want good things to happen to each other and to themselves. And I experience that in bucket loads every day. And I was quite taken back. I was quite surprised at how kind, even just small acts of, I ran out of water, a random stranger that didn't have a lot would give me a bottle of water, or whether they'd give me a lift to the airport, or whether they'd point me in the right direction, or whether they would remind me that, oh, by the way, around the corner there's a couple of dogs, you might want to avoid that street, they're stray dogs, and little things and then they add up to, I stayed with something like 80 plus families around the world that just said, don't know you, but you're doing this thing, come and stay with us, and couldn't necessarily speak their language. They may never see them again. And it was brilliant. You talk about the kind of the blue ball of astronauts. I have this wonderful perspective now of the planet, and it's almost a paradoxically tiny and huge at the same time. There were, I think about my experiences, and they seem just in touching distance in my memory. They're very and in distance. I could just hop on a plane, and within half a day I can be anywhere in the world, basically. And that is quite something. And then also you think of the scale. One of the really profound things that happened when I finished, and I've been reflecting on ever since, especially in interviews and conversations and various speaking events that I do, which is the more I see, the more I realize I haven't seen. That's the reality of this trip. You see every country in the world and you go, well, I've not even been to every town in my own country. Even though I've also have the record for circumnavigating my country and running top to bottom, and I've done a lot within tiny little islands of the UK. Yeah, exactly. I've got exactly my Strava heat map's pretty vast, and even so, there's so many places that I've never heard of, and I will never hear of, and I will never be able to go. Even if I had 1,000 years of life, it would be impossible. So it's quite alarmingly huge when you think of it like that, and yet also very close and very small.
One of the moments I had to ask about was you mentioned in your. Actually, sorry, let me back up for a sec. I'm curious, like, once you finish, you've wrapped up your 196. I don't know if this question doesn't make sense, but like, you're done. But how long does it take for you after finishing that last step to really fully realizing the feat of your accomplishment? Does that make sense?
Yeah,
like, imagine there's a lag time between.
It does make sense. And I don't think I have fully. And it's been years. And I think the reality is, as soon as I cross that finish line, there's an absolute onslaught of emotions, many of those emotions conflicting, and you're not really sure what to make of it. And that isn't concluded over a 48-hour, 72-hour period. It doesn't just, one day you wake up and you go, okay, that was done, let's close the door. There was media, speaking events, books, everything blew up, and then it hasn't stopped. The only thing that I think helped me was that when COVID hit, very shortly after I finished, I had to stop traveling because I'd run out of countries. I'd finished my mission, but everybody else in the world also stopped traveling. And so I was, by some very weird, once in a species kind of event happening, I was also in that position where I had to stop traveling, and so I was experiencing it the same as everybody else. And I was also fortunate then to go on and run 100 marathons in 100 days from the north to the south of Italy during the middle two periods of when COVID kind of, we thought it was gone and it wasn't quite. So it was a very weird time, and the answer to your question is I haven't fully realized and thought about it, even though I've spoken about every moment thousands of times and written about it and thought about it and have thousands of souvenirs and books. But what I think is really interesting is that the harder the achievement, the longer that accomplishment lives with you. And it sounds obvious, and it sounds like something that you just see written on an Instagram post or something, and you go, yeah, of course. But when you actually live it, it's really quite nice, because I knew that was hard, and it was very nearly didn't happen in the first place. It very nearly didn't get to the start line, let alone very nearly didn't get to the finish line. But then every now and then I'll have these moments of pride and chatting things through. And I've actually got my parents staying with us for a couple of days, and they were quite instrumental in, I think, my childhood led me to be the person that, as you very rightly said, would dream that big. And it was all thanks to them. So there's all those kind of moments where you revisit it. And I don't think I really have a day where I fully close that book and go, oh yeah, that was that trip. It's still very much alive in my mind. Yeah.
I would think that's interesting to hear you say that, because I would think you going through the process of actually writing a book chronicling these events, like almost finishing the book would be, oh yeah, this is what I've done. Like it can really sink in now.
The problem with the book is that I didn't have a lot of memory of previous. So, for example, let's say I'm on week 20 of 100, roughly 100 weeks. I could maybe remember the last week or two, but before that, I'm tired. I'm traveling, 3 countries a week, roughly, for 100 week-ish. Lots of countries, lots of traveling, lots of logistics, and then everything blurs into one. And before you know it, 2 years has passed and you've finished. And so writing the book was a chance to open all of those photos, diary entries, and write about it. But then you're focusing on telling the story, sharing the moments. And although it brought back all these memories and it was wonderful, it was truly brilliant to write that book, because I could relive things and see photos and get in contact with people again that I'd not seen for, since I was staying with their family or playing table tennis on their, in their back garden with people I can't speak their language in another continent that I've not spent much time in. So, and yet it didn't help to conclude the journey, because it felt like I was only living it for the first time, if that makes sense.
Yes.
I ran it and then I lived it through writing about it. So it was odd.
What was the reception to the idea after you told your parents? That you said they asked, like, how many countries is that? And then you imagine, you tell them, and then how do your friends and family take it?
I've always been ambitious. I've always kind of made things happen. And we have a bit of a phrase within my friends and circle, if you like, which is do the hard thing. And do the hard thing is if it's there and it's difficult, then there's almost motivation to do it. And this one was off the scale. It was difficult. It was going to be impossible, but it would be something so amazing. Could we pull it off? So they knew that I was serious, which is the main thing. Because if I was talking to them about it, then it happens. That's kind of just an unwritten rule. If I'm thinking about something that I want to do, I might just go, oh, I might want to do this at some point. But if I say this is happening, then they know it's happening. So I think the first initial feeling was a bit of fear from my mum, certainly, because of, you realize there's countries that are not going to be particularly safe.
Yeah.
And then I think there's also the anxiety with the financial element, that how are we going to make this work? How can they support working towards finding the route to the start line?
Yeah.
And they were brilliant. but it was still very unknown at that point, and we had no idea whether we could plan it in 3 months or whether it was going to take, as it did, 2 years. So, and then everything got a little bit more serious, and I don't think there was any hesitation on any of them that thought, that's silly, you're not going to do that. They knew I was serious, and they knew we would do it, but it was to what cost? And I think that was the unspoken thing in everybody's mind.
Do you take the approach for ambitious feats, like the eating the elephant methodology, where it's just like it's too big, so you got to break it down into smaller and smaller bites, and eventually the smallest bite you could do?
Is that how you think about it? I think that's it. And this project was automatically that, because it, by its very nature, you were doing one country at a time. And up to that point, I'd run 450 odd, probably more, 550 odd marathons up to that point, which meant I've done the running bit that many times, and then some. I've done the traveling to a race, let's say Paris Marathon, done that many times. Yeah. So we just need to do it again piecemeal. I think it's an automatic thing in my mind to say, well, we obviously can't approach it as a bigger picture. We can break it down by country. We can break it down by continent. We can break it down by in 5K terms when I'm running. We can break down the sponsorship by, okay, if we had £500 per country, then that might mean that that's possible. And so we break everything down, and that was an automatic thing. However, the reality is that finishing the mission is still the elephant. You can't get away from that. And so that was definitely looming in the back of our minds, is that the difficulty isn't the individual pieces, it's being able to stomach the whole elephant.
Yeah. What was the most bureaucratically difficult country to get access to?
The most challenging countries in terms of bureaucracy would be Bhutan, Turkmenistan, North Korea, Iran, Libya to an extent, Yemen, places that for whatever reason either have kingdoms and then permissions. You either have to have certain rules and regulations to be there. I mean, North Korea is a prime example. But the thing about those is, if there is a process in place, then it's almost like if you go through the countries list and go, oh, right, Bhutan, they have a process of, you have to have a letter from the king, you have to do X and Y, you have to get permission, you have to pay this much money to be attached to a tour company to go. So there's a process. So you can almost go, tick, we just need to do that. It's the countries that don't have the process that are the challenging ones, and that are not neat and tidy.
So like an absence of bureaucracy almost. Yeah.
Exactly. The absence of bureaucracy makes it more bureaucratic.
Interesting.
Believe it or not. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And what would those be? Could you give an example of a few of those?
So let's say Iran. Iran initially wasn't very happy with me going to every country, because we were very open with the visa process, which was, hello, this is my name, this is what I'm trying to do, I'd like access to your country for a period of time. It seemed a sensible approach. They probably know anyway in the media, and also it's a genuine reason to be in the country. Why would a white British man be in the country otherwise? So it's to share the truth. But that, as you can imagine, comes with some complications. If you've been to one country that they are not particularly friendly with, then they will say, well, if you come to us, then you can't go there because we don't like them. Or, I'm paraphrasing, but you get the idea.
I read this.
And so you have to understand how to play that. For Iran, they refused my visa, I think 4 or 5 times. It was very, and again, I wasn't privy to this, because by that point we tried to have permission before I left, but there was so much that still needed to be done once I was already on the road. January the 6th, 2018, I set off, and then family, friends, parents, team were then working tirelessly, literally tirelessly in the background to make things happen. And it was getting very close to the wire, where they were saying no for random reasons. They were saying, well, maybe. They were saying yes, and then they were drawing their yes to a no. So it was just completely up in the air. So we didn't know that by the time my diary rolled around to say, right, I was going to go to Iran and run, whether they'd let me in. And that happened a couple of times. That the diary date rolled around and they refused entry, and we had to slot it in somewhere else in the calendar, which meant moving other countries, which meant moving other visas. So eventually I did get a 12-hour visa, and I I arrived and I had my chaperone guide and I ran and I left.
Did you say 12-hour visa?
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So I was running at night because that was when I landed.
Yeah.
That sort of stuff, and you make it work. And you think, well, there's probably not a box to tick where you want a 12-hour visa, and of course there isn't. But whatever you do, you make it possible. And I think that's one of the big lessons. And when I speak to schools or corporates or stand up in front of people and share the stories, is that there are lots of rules and regulations with everything. But if you're coming at whatever it may be, whether it's this project or anything else, if you're coming at it with the right incentives, with good intentions, then those rules are there to be bent, broken, changed, adapted. Ask the questions, do the hard thing, do the thing that isn't the tick box. It's like you have A, B, C, D on the tick box, and then you kind of create a new box on the end and tick that one. That was exactly running the world, and without that approach, we would not have even started.
Yeah, that's fascinating. It's just such a wealth of interesting and fascinating stories. I'm curious on the other end of the spectrum, just in terms of larger countries and then smaller countries. So with a country like the US or Canada, how do you think about picking where you want to run? Is there a fun calculus involved, or is it all utilitarian, like, oh, this is the easiest airport access?
Yeah, it's spot on, really, a bit of both. So, for example, the US is a good example because you have 3 of the 6 world marathon majors. So you've got Chicago, Boston, New York, London, Tokyo, and Berlin. So 1 in Asia, 2 in Europe, and 3 in the US. And as part of this project, to gain extra press and to tick them off in one go, I wanted to do all of them, even though I'd done some of them already. I wanted to do all of them in totality. And so I was going to go to 3 US places, but due to the logistics, I started in Canada, in Toronto, and where is immediately due south of Toronto? Miami. It was the easiest, cheapest, most direct flight. So the official 196 marathon in the US was in Miami because it made most sense. And then during my transits through the US to get to other countries later on in the project, I would then slot in New York, Chicago, and Boston. And so
with all your free time?
With all my free time, yeah, exactly. Just a challenge. And I'll tell you what, something to consider there, talking about free time. If you were to enter an official race and run an official marathon with a bib number and a medal and a timing chips and loads of press, like the majors, if you were to enter those races, and if I did official events where we didn't organize stuff ourselves in every country, the trip would have taken 9 extra months to complete due to having just half a day to pick up a bib number, to get to the right start line, to navigate public transport when most of public transport is closed because they've got a big marathon on in the city. So little things like that were a big consideration, let alone the cost of entering the races. So it started off by, I don't want to go and run the Paris Marathon because I've done the Paris Marathon time and time again. I want to go and run somewhere else in France, for example, that I've not run. And so I would turn up, in this instance, it was Nice, and I would run and I'd have people to run with, and we'd organize the route and it would all be, official. But then as the trip went on, I was ending up with thousands of people running with me because press would get out, and then I would arrive in a country and I'd be greeted by the president and or the minister of sport and all the news channels, and it would just get bigger and bigger and bigger. And so the races literally came to me. I just turn up wherever I was, and then there'd be a race that was created for me. And that wasn't the plan. That wasn't how we envisaged it, but it's what happened. So I'm very grateful.
I'm picturing that running scene in Forrest Gump, where he starts alone and
it's
the crowd following him.
Bang on. Yeah, that actually happened you talk about big countries and small countries. That happened in the smallest country in the world, which is, if you know the answer to that question.
San Marino, Vatican City?
There we go, Vatican City. Vatican City, San Marino is not far off. So Vatican City, smallest country, and 80 laps of St. Peter's Square I did in the project. And by the end of that, there was loads of people running with me and high-fiving me. And yeah, it was it was a wonderful, wonderful thing to do.
Yeah, my next question was actually about this false country. That's so funny. So people were just like, "What is this guy doing laps around?"
Yeah, initially it was pre sunrise, just as the sun was rising. Really, I would set off to try and beat the heat. It was heat wave in Europe, and I'd get running, and then slowly but surely, people would kind of go, "Oh, he's doing a lot of running," and then as it got bigger, anybody that's been to Vatican will know. Essentially, it's a big queuing system in order to get into the building to see stuff, and the queue really forms in St. Peter's Square. And this queue of lots of tourists as people then start to gather, and I'm weaving in and out of them and trying not to push anyone out of the way. And then, of course, people start to see what I'm doing. Maybe some people are sat down on the kind of the big stones that's kind of in this semicircle area, and they stick out their hand to offer me a high five as I run past. And then after the 10th high five, they encouraged their 7-8-year-old child to go, okay, go and do a lap with him. He's doing something cool. And then the word gets out, and then it just Forrest Gump style just gets bigger and bigger.
I love that. When I think about breaking down risk, I think, okay, there's human risk, there's probably wildlife risk, and then geographic risk. Were there ever moments where like stray dogs were chasing you, or like something even more menacing was following you?
Yeah, dogs were more of a challenge than I thought they would be. I adore dogs. I have nothing against dogs. I think they're the angels of the world. I absolutely love dogs. However, there's a lot of dogs in the world that don't know that I love them, and they are hungry. They don't have anyone to look after them, and they have their own patch of land. And I would say half of every country in the world has an awful lot of stray dogs and a lot of situations where it makes it unsafe to run. I've heard some horrendous stories, and I've also been a part of some situations where dogs would be surrounding me. I was bitten multiple times, chased many times. And also, even if you don't get bitten or chased, you are running for 26 miles in every country with the fear that even if it's a tiny dog, will just come out and it will just snip your Achilles. Game over. You can't. And part of Guinness World Records guidelines, actually, which most people don't know as part of this project, is I had to be continuing. The journey had to be progressing at least every 14 days. So if I got an injury that knocked me out for more than 10 days, that was it. Game over.
Wow.
Not possible. So I was very, very keen not to be bitten, and yet I was still bitten. And yes, there was many moments where you have to kind of flee from a stray dog. I think the most telling time was in Marshall Islands in the Pacific Ocean, quite close to the end of the trip. I rocked up to this kind of hotel shack. It was if anybody's been to the Marshall Islands, you'll know it's a beautiful tropical island, but it's minimal, let's put it that way. And this hotel had a little receptionist, and she gave me my room key, and she gave me a stick, and she said, "You'll need the stick if you leave the hotel." And by that point, I've done enough countries, and I knew exactly what she meant, which was, the dogs are there, just protect yourself.
Yeah.
But I didn't know to what extent. And within a couple of miles, having left the hotel, I was literally surrounded. 25 dogs, couldn't move, barking, yapping, being aggressive, or just generally being there. It doesn't have to be aggressive. It's still intimidating if you've got 25 dogs that are stray and you don't know what's going to happen. And so I literally had to retreat, swinging my stick slowly all the way back to the hotel.
This feels like a prehistory story.
Caveman
exactly. Nick was telling his fire mates that.
Exactly that. And I got back, and I ended up running laps and laps, 340 laps, I think it was, of this tiny little like gravel area, which was basically a car park that was semi-cordoned off, so I didn't have to worry about the dogs. And people were like, well, why did you do that? Why did you not find another way? Because you don't have energy, you don't have time. I was traveling to the next country the next day, so you just have to make it work. And that was one of the biggest lessons, is that if it's on you, because everybody else has got me there, they've got my visas, they've got the flights, the sponsors have done their job, my family have done their job. All I need to do is do the run. I need to get it done. And so the responsibility falls to you to do whatever it takes to get that run done. And that was pretty much my driver in every country. Just, I need to do my bit now, which is get the miles done.
Yeah. Gosh, it's fascinating. Well, I'm excited. I really want to read your book now, and I was hoping you could tell me about Run Weekends.
Yes, Run Weekends. So Run Weekends is I suppose, the love child of running the world. So running the world was this big mission we've been talking about. I then finished. I then went on to do another few events and have now got lots of different world records. But lots of people came to me and said, well, why don't you organize trips for people? Why don't you take us away? Why could you offer a package where you can show us what it was like?
Right.
And for a long time I resisted because I was too busy writing books or speaking events or generally just running other challenges, setting my own missions and doing my thing. And then I realized, well, if I want a bit more stability, it makes sense to have this concept where I can take people away. And I kind of put it out to the world and created it. And now we have trips all over the world. Essentially, Run Weekends is retreats / holidays for runners anywhere, everywhere from Tajikistan, Mongolia, Croatia, Australia, the Italian Dolomites, lots in the UK, Scotland, Wales, UK, England. Sometimes they're 3 nights staying in tents. Sometimes they're a week staying in a 5-star hotel with private chefs. Sometimes you do horseback riding.
Full
Sometimes
range,
you've got the whole thing. You've got the whole
Yeah.
thing. And the thing I love about it the most is that it is for everyone. And I didn't want it to be this elitist kind of, if you can't run 100 miles, then don't turn up, because there's plenty of events like that, and we don't need more of them. And so the idea is that if you want to come and run with us across the middle of Australia, which is our 14-day, 12-night trip across the middle of the Larapinta Trail in Australia, then you can come along. But if you want to hop in the car for a couple of days, then hop in the car. If you want to do the run, then get out and run. It's flexible, and so anybody can sign up. Anybody can come and do it, and I thoroughly enjoy it. It's a lot of work, a lot of admin, a lot of effort, but it's now my way of life, and I'm very proud and glad that it's happening.
And we opened this conversation you talking about building awareness for prostate cancer. How did that process continue throughout?
Yeah, so Prostate Cancer UK was the main driver, and that was all because I met this brilliant guy called Kevin Webber. I was racing with him out in the Sahara Desert doing the famous Marathon des Sables race, and he was a stranger at the time, but just got chatting, and he told me that he had terminal cancer, might only live for 2 years, and it was prostate cancer. And so that was this big spark, because he asked me a very important question, which I think everybody should ask themselves, which is, what would you do if you could do anything in the world? And he asked me that question as a dying man, and I was very embarrassed because I didn't have an answer, and I think everybody should have an answer to that question, like straight away. And I eventually found the answer, which is, let's go and run a marathon in every country in the world. And so we decided that this mission would happen. We would raise a load of money to help fight the cancer, and other people in his position could benefit from extra research and awareness. And so I will say, if anybody's listening to this and you're a man and you're over 40 years old, then go and get checked. It's a blood test, it's simple, and it could save your life. And there can potentially be no symptoms beforehand. So we did loads of awareness, did a load of press, we raised millions of pounds over the years. And then coming back from the trip, I realized that I wanted to have my own legacy, have my own entity that would kind of live on. And so I created the 196 Foundation, and obviously 196 countries, 196 Foundation, that's the number. I see that number everywhere, by the way, now, whether it's on a car number plate or whatever, 196, I see everywhere. But the 196 Foundation is designed to help causes, and I say causes on purpose, any cause anywhere in the world, once a year. So we ask for donations of £1.96 per month, or $1.96 per month, or €1.96 per month. And anybody can donate, and it goes into a central pot. And then every year we offer to the donors a vote on who we help. We offer 3 options, and it could be buying a wheelchair for somebody that needs a wheelchair. It could be building a school. Last year we did a brilliant project, which we developed 41 acres of basically abandoned land in Kenya into a farm. which now has profits of $260,000 from a £20,000 grant that we gave them. And so it's developed. It has been farmed. They're being able to employ staff. They're being able to feed the children in local schools, and the profits are then going to building a school in Kenya. And that is all from people's tiny donations every month. So if you can afford it, £1.96 a month, not a lot, $1.96 a month, put it in the pot, and then every year we go and support a project somewhere in the world.
Yeah, what a great idea.
Yeah, I just saw a lot of people that needed a leg up, that needed a little bit of they don't need a lot, but just a little bit, and it can make a lot of difference. And I didn't want to create a charity that was another charity that just helped something very specific. I wanted just to be able to funnel the money to the right places. And I've got a good team, and it's working very well.
Oh, congratulations. And that's awesome. Well, Nick, what's the best way for people to follow or support you?
Best way is to either follow me on social media. So my name on social media is Nick Butter Run. Pretty obvious, Nick Butter Run. Or my website, which is just nickbutter.com. And then you can find all the various things through the charity, or just Google Run Weekends, and you can see everything we're doing there. Sign up to the newsletter. Every month you'll get a newsletter from me that says this is what I've been doing, this is what we've got on offer, this is where you can come and run with me. If you want some coaching, you're coaching there. And then stay in touch and chat. I pretty enjoy that side of it. There's the social element of getting to know more people. That's what running is about ultimately, isn't it? So it was anyone can get in touch and come and run.
Yeah, listen, I love your Instagram, and thanks for posting. It's inspiring seeing your content, and
thank you.
Challenging in the best way to think about your level of ambition. It's great.
Yeah, there's so much more coming, and we've got various books out, and I think the Running the World book and one of my latest books, Run Britain, where I ran 2 marathons a day for 4 months around the coast of Britain. Those books are very different. One of them is about Britain, just a tiny little island, and the other one is about the whole world. But there are also running stories that kind of hit a point and make a little mark. So I'm very proud of those books, because those journeys were sufferfest, and we've achieved them. But we've got things on the horizon that will be just as fun and just as big.
Yeah, I'm glad the momentum continues.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Nick. It's been a great conversation. I really appreciate the time.
No, thank you for fitting me in. It's been really good to chat, and I think thanks to you as well, because you offer me the platform to chat, and other people can listen and hear great stories through your channel. So thank you very much. It's been a good chat, mate.
Huge thank you to Nick for joining this podcast. It's fascinating hearing all your incredible stories. Be sure to check out his book and socials in the description below. And hit like, follow, subscribe, 5 stars, every button on the platform, so we can grow this podcast. Thanks.